for the 2024 Husqvarna launch, and we've all been waiting eagerly for this to arrive, or these models to arrive, because it has been a full new model change. All of the bikes now have all seen over 90% change right the way through the range. So all the 2-strokes and all the 4-strokes. I rode every single bike today. I've got some favourites of bikes that I'd like mainly to talk about. I'm going to touch on some of the some more of the features, a little bit more specific to what I felt regarding on certain bikes and certain models, and what my favourite bikes were. So if we go through the 4-stroke range first of all, my favourite bike there was the 350. I started off on the 250F, but the 350 was definitely one what I liked. So the FE 350, it seemed to be a bike that basically, when I was riding around, did everything for me. It was a bike that I felt like I could handle. The connection points on from rider to bike was really good, and the movement on the bike when I was going around the technical track behind me was good. There was a little track over, well, should I say, there was 2 tracks that we rode today. So one was, I would like to say, quite slow, rocky and technical. And then there was a smaller track which you could get some speed on and really open up the bikes and to see what they had at the top end. Yeah, so going back to the 4-stroke range, for me personally, you know, the 501 model, it's always surprising how much you can do on that bike when you're put into tight spaces. But for me personally, obviously riding the bike in England I wouldn't choose that bike, because I haven't got the places to ride. Obviously, if you're in America or if you're in Australia and you're doing a cross country, you're going to love that bike. The 450, again, just felt, for me personally, it felt like ticked all the boxes. But the reason why it wasn't my favourite was because it felt still a little bit more, I had to manhandle the bike just maybe a little bit more than I did the 350. The 350 stood out because it is a bike on its own now. The 250F, I loved that bike. That bike was good to ride. And again, riding over the obstacles and the rocks, bumps, no problems whatsoever. 450, you know, for me, yes, that would probably be, you know, a racer's bike. The 350, maybe more of a hobby bike. 250, obviously within that category, if you're, you know, if you've got the ability, and you're not going to be disappointed with that bike whatsoever. The things that surprised me on the 4-stroke range was how easy all the bikes were to ride. The frame and the suspension, also the way that the power is delivered. Yes, you've got some extra features like the quick shifter like we see on the motocross bike. We've also got the mapping. But for me, the main factors was the rideability of the bike and the power characteristics. So that's why I've spoken the way that I have regarding with the 4-strokes. Now if I move on to the 2-strokes. So first of all, I rode the 150. I've enjoyed that bike previously. I'm not sure where it fits, if I'm honest. I don't know what category the 150 does fit into in the UK. Over the previous model, the bike has got so much more mid-range. The power you can feel is just a massive improvement on that bike. Sometimes I felt like the bike was a little bit nervous. That was the one what I felt was probably the most nervous across all of the range, including 2-stroke and 4-stroke. But definitely a fun bike to ride, and I see some people riding around today who really enjoyed that bike as well, and they wanted to, when we was doing a bike swap, they wanted to take that bike off me because they felt really comfortable on it. But for me personally, I just felt like that was the bike out of the full range that I felt needed some more, maybe attention, just to refine it, just so it basically ticked the boxes, not just for the person that I was passing the bike to, but also to meet my needs. The 250 has always been my favourite bike in the past, and it's still a good bike. But today the 300 topped that. And the reason why that was because I felt like the power, it was the power characteristics of the 300. Previously, on the previous model, I felt that the 300 would sign off a little bit early. Maybe the fuel injection, you know, maybe it wasn't quite running as efficiently as it could. That has changed for 24. The bike now feels more efficient. even just when I'm sat on the bike and I'm revving right through the, through the range, just revving the bike, you can feel it's not quite as lumpy, and it does kind of rev through how it should, how a normal, how an old carburettor bike would do. So for me, that was a massive positive, and that felt the same on the 250 and on the 300. But the 300 topped it because it had that wider linear power, which basically would stretch out longer. It complemented the gear ratio. Previously, I always felt I was caught in between some gears, maybe wanted to change the bike. This time I didn't feel that at all. I just felt that the bike, would lug third, second, it would stretch out a little bit in second as well. And then it just, it was just the overall package for me today. Now, if I was to talk about the three bikes in general on the two strokes, again, massive improvements. And the reason why that is because although that it's only 6mm, 9mm, or the foot pegs offer more surface area for you to control the bike, and the subframe as well, it's basically, I think it's like a hybrid now, we'll call it. So, it's got, where previously it was all plastic all the way through, was a little bit more rigid. Now it's got some more movement and more feel, and you'd certainly feel that as a rider, and the same as when you've got your feet planted on the pegs. When you're going through some of the rock sections and when you're going through some of the tree stumps, you just feel like you've got a little bit more, you can run a little bit closer, but the frame in general is slimmer and the bike is slimmer. So when you're going through the trees and when you're just going down that narrow path or narrow trail, and you've got a tree stump and rock, you can feel that you've got confidence to go a little bit more faster and know that your feet are safe. On a previous Husky test, I did actually break my foot by hitting a tree stump, and that was my own fault. So when I was riding today, I was really cautious of that, but actually, like, that was early on. After that, I just felt like I could, move the bike, no problem. So again, if we touched on what the major, if we touch on some of the bullet points, what I really liked on the two-stroke range was the power. I felt like the connection from throttle to rear wheel, the fuel injection was so much better. It's in the past maybe been criticised because it hasn't had that carburettor connection and that feel. I feel like this model has definitely got an improvement and definitely has that connection and that feel, and that is on the 150, on the 250 and on the 300. That's down to how the power valve system works. Slimmer, and also as well, massive improvement is the suspension. So I'm led to believe that what's happened now is that they kind of run in the same system as, let's say, the cone valve, but obviously they're not cone valve, but that's the idea, that's the concept. They wanted to achieve that feel with these models, and for me personally, the front end has always kind of dipped. You've never been 100% confident in kind of hitting stuff. I never touched the clicker today, didn't need to. I felt comfortable straight away on the bikes. The bikes were planted and they were very well balanced. And that's whether I was on the flat field, going over rock beds, going up rock faces, whatever it may be. Tree roots. I felt that the bike was so much more stable and it gave me confidence to ride. Looking back at that Husqvarna 2024, the Enduro range, the TE and the FE range, I rode every single model that was available to ride, and was very impressed with Husqvarna's new range. So basically this is a new generation of Enduro bike that's come out for 2024, and one of the things what really impressed me the most was the balance of the bike, the suspension quality, how well it handled. It was quite extreme and quite rocky at the places where we was riding in Norway. In 2018, Husqvarna introduced the TPI, and I remember riding in Canada with the bike, and in all honesty, there was quite a few little bugs with this bike at the time, some issues. There's been quite some kickback as well, saying that the bike doesn't feel like a carburettor bike, and it's nice now that all of that has kind of, from that time to now, that actually they've been carrying on with the progression and really got that
that dialed. So the TBI, as it is now called, is definitely refined, definitely something that you feel now as a rider is an advantage. And you know, the way that the power is delivered, the response, the connection, it's all there. You know, you're not gonna moan about it. Regarding with fuel injection, there is a different way to ride the two strokes. But once you get your head around it and you kind of get used to it and adapt to that, there's a lot of advantages to be able to ride like that. Yes, it does make it easier for a wide range of people, should I say? You know, because there's a technique to being able to ride a two-stroke carburetor bike fast, or find that feeling, or even setting up the bike. So a lot of that has been taken away, but there is also as well, there's a way to be this bike to be ridden. These bikes have been totally revised. You know, they're 90%, over 90% different to their predecessor, and you can feel that. For me personally, I didn't get the chance to ride on the KTM range, but from listening to quite a few of the riders and journalists, I think there was over 50 on the Husky one. You know, some of them were impressed with the KTM, some of them weren't, but most of them seemed quite to be buzzed up about the Husqvarna, and it does feel like they've refined that brand, their models. It does seem to be the enduro bike, if you ask me. So, you know, if I had my choice, that's the route that I'd be going. You know, I'd be definitely going down the Husqvarna route.